Namaste, friends. I want to thank you for having me on this panel in the Parliament of World Religions 2021. I am speaking to you from New York, and it is in the context of this city and our world that I want to speak to you about religions today and the power of hope that we can get from them. There are two instances which I want to take up. First is this global pandemic. We are faced with a grave crisis all over the world. Perhaps every generation has to face their challenge, and this is perhaps the challenge of our generation. Here in New York, last year, the COVID pandemic was at its worst, the largest number of infections, the largest number of deaths anywhere in the world. Here in this city, every day we saw nearly 1,000 persons dying from COVID. I talked to doctors and healthcare workers and people who suffered from COVID and people who lost near and dear ones to COVID. One thing which emerged from it all was the power of spirituality. All of them, they said without exception that without our spiritual life, and they come from different traditions, without our spiritual life, whatever tradition we come from, without that, we couldn't have faced this tremendous challenge. Our spiritual lives, our spiritual practices, prayer, meditation, mindfulness, faith, these were sources of resilience, of strength, of continuing to be compassionate in the midst of a challenge which was grinding them down day by day, in the midst of losses which were like one healthcare worker, she said it was like being on a battlefield. It was tremendous. And yet in the midst of it, the source of hope, strength, resilience was her own spiritual life. And this is something that I heard from people across the board. At the beginning of the COVID crisis, somebody asked me, so in the midst of this crisis, are we supposed to talk about religion, spirituality, and metaphysics? And I said, this is the time to talk about spirituality. This is the time to draw upon the resources, not only of our own spiritual tradition, all the world's traditions, spiritual traditions, religious traditions are a resource that we can draw upon. It is the greatest resource that humanity has had since the beginning of civilization. The second thing which I want to bring up today is that religion, being the greatest force that humanity has ever seen, has a dark side. Here in New York again, last week, we had the 20th anniversary of the 9/11 terror attacks. 20 years ago, a group of misguided men motivated by religious fanaticism committed the worst terrorist atrocity in human history. More than 3,000 people died here, not very far from where I'm sitting. I saw in the evening sky twin pillars of light where the Twin Towers used to stand, twin pillars of light going up into the evening sky, 6 kilometers into the evening sky, as if reaching out into infinity, representing the 3,000 souls who lost their lives on that tragic occasion. Swami Vivekananda, speaking in the, embodying the spirit of the World Parliament of Religions in 1893 on 9/11, he said that we not only believe in tolerance, but in universal acceptance of all religions as true. You see, in the very idea of tolerance lies the seed of violence. I tolerate you means that I think I am right, you are wrong, but I'm just sort of suffering you to live. But universal acceptance, which is the spirit of the World Parliament of Religions, it says that we accept the truth of all religions, that they all lead to spiritual freedom, that they all lead to the spiritual goal, and therefore they're all worthy of respect. If I love and respect my own religious tradition, then I must equally love and respect the religious traditions, the spiritual traditions of all of humanity. Swami Vivekananda embodied the very spirit of the Parliament of Religions. He said of his own master, Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, that I knew a man whose very life was a Parliament of Religions. Now, that is an example for all of us. Today, we have to draw upon the resources of the world religions to give us hope in the midst of this global pandemic, which is still going on, and strength, and to use the positive forces of religion to transform our lives, to make our lives a blessing for ourselves and a blessing for others. Our spiritual traditions, in the best spirit, they have harmony amongst each other, not conflict. They do not conflict with reason and science. Spiritual traditions are in full accord with the latest values of humanism. It is in this spirit that we must take our religions, our spirituality. We draw upon these ancient traditions to give us hope, to lead our lives in the midst of this darkness today, and to shine our light, like those twin pillars of light reaching out to infinity, which New York skyline we saw just a few days ago. Like that light, a spiritual light, to shine out through the ages. Thank you once again for having me. I pray to the Lord to bless all of us. Namaste.